Hey guys, it's John here from Sonic Drive Studio. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to another episode of John's Tone Chronicles, a show all about awesome guitar tones and awesome guitar gear. And this episode is all about vintage rock tones. You guys know me, I'm mainly a rock and metal guy, so I'm very familiar with the modern tones, but I also have a soft spot for bands like Led Zeppelin. How can one not be a Led Zeppelin fan though, right? Aerosmith is another one of those bands that I really enjoy, and those vintage Marshall crunch tones have always been a little bit elusive to me. Still to this day. So in this episode I'm going to try to get a nice vintage crunch rock tone with my PRS SC58 and my Marshall SV20H. So let's go ahead and take a listen to what I've come up with. Here we go. Sweet, I really enjoyed that, and I think that the tones came out pretty nice as well. We've got that nice vintage Marshall Plexi grind going on, a very cool and familiar sound. Not overly high gain of course, just a nice mid-gain crunch with plenty of bite, clarity and punch. But how did I achieve these tones? I'm glad I asked. Now let's go over the gear that I used and the signal chain, etc. Let's start with the guitar. My beautiful Paul Reed Smith SC58. Such a beautiful, beautiful guitar. Definitely the most fancy guitar in my collection, that's for sure. Maybe you've already seen me use this guitar in a couple of videos, but yeah, it's an amazing guitar that I got used a couple of months ago. I traded an old Ibanez guitar for this one. So this guitar feels right at home for those vintage flavors, for that old Les Paul type of sound basically. So the SC58 obviously is a single cut guitar. This was made in the USA. It's an artist model, so it has a very nice artist grade top with that very nice and unique flaming going on. Absolutely gorgeous. And I gotta tell you, the sound of this guitar is absolutely phenomenal, probably due to the quality woods that they used. This guitar just has a very nice natural ring and sustain and resonance to it. It sounds absolutely amazing even when it's not plugged in. So I can really tell that they used high quality woods here. And if you think that tone wood doesn't matter, then this guitar would likely prove you wrong. So this guitar is great in multiple ways. It looks gorgeous, it sounds amazing, and it plays great too. And I'm quite fond of the pattern neck actually. The pickups that are in this guitar are the PRS 5708s, which are based on old 57 PAFs. And these pickups were made in 2008 if I'm correct. They sound great and very rich harmonically, and they seem to fit this guitar very well. Now I'm not a PAF expert or a vintage pickup expert for that matter, but all I can say is that I'm really digging the tones that I'm getting out of this guitar. So yeah, what's not to love about this wonderful, wonderful beauty? And then of course the guitar was played through my Marshall SV20H, or Mini Plexi, or Studio Vintage, or Mark II Studio, or 1959 SLP, whichever designation you prefer. It's basically a mini 20 watt Plexi. And this is basically the perfect Plexi for my personal use because of its size and the lower wattage. You definitely need to crank this amplifier to get some usable crunch tones out of it, so the 20 watts really help to make this amp more manageable. And I'm using the input jumping or jumpering technique to get a little bit more flexibility out of this amplifier when it comes to tones. And it's a cool feature that's pretty unique when compared to all my other amplifiers. So this is the only amp that can do that basically. If you're not familiar with these types of amps, they basically have 4 individual inputs. A high treble input, which sounds very bright and cutting, and a normal input, which sounds much darker. And then you also have 2 sensitivity options for both channels. Sometimes the high treble input is way too bright, and other times the normal input is way too dark. By jumping the channels, you can basically get both inputs on at the same time, or both channels on at the same time, in various configurations depending on how you hook it up or plug it in. And then with the loudness controls, which are basically volume and gain controls, you can blend the 2 channels to your liking. I have it set so that the low end is thick and chunky enough for the low palm mutes, but still with plenty of string definition and bite, as you would expect from such an amplifier. So these amplifiers are very cool and unique, and I'm still learning new things about it every time when I turn it on. But so far I'm really enjoying the tones that I'm getting out of the Marshall SV20H. Then from the amp, of course, we're going into my trusty Fractal Audio LB2 reactive load box for that authentic speaker response. And from there on, we're going into an impulse response from Ownhammer, which is based on a vintage 4x12 Marshall cabinet loaded with vintage greenbacks. I'm talking about the 412 MRBW GNR M25 MMMC package to be precise, which is an awesome pack for those vintage Marshall tones, and I'm using the GNR voicing with the JS mic mix, which is a very nice rich and fat sounding mic mix, and it seems to complement this amp very nicely. In the DAW I have a little bit of reverb going on the guitars, just to add a little bit of room ambience, and I'm using the Verb Suite Classics plugin for that. For these mid-gain vintage type tones, a little bit of reverb can do a lot. It's kind of subtle, but in the mix it really adds to the whole sound. It just makes the guitar sound a little bit more alive and less direct. So again, kind of subtle, but it does make a difference in the entire mix. No post-processing other than that, aside from a little low cut at around 80 Hz. And that's it. Now I obviously recorded 2 guitar parts, one somewhat on the left and the other all the way to the right. And there you go, some very nice vintage classic rock tones. That's all for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it and the guitar tones. Definitely let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are on the tones, because I'd love to know. Please also drop a like and a subscribe, as that really helps the channel out. And you can also follow Sonic Drive Studio on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which I really recommend, by the way, for some exclusive content. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Cheers!